Hi everybody, welcome back to our channel. It's been a little while since we posted a video. We noticed that we have new subscribers, so thank you very much for subscribing. I hope you're getting a lot out of these videos. We're intending them to be helpful for your spiritual journey and for doing the work that we recommend people do to heal. So this is a video on, we're going to call it Self-Love Part 2. And we're going to address some statements we've heard recently from different so-called relationship experts and
thought leaders.
We always stress that it's very important who you're listening to and who you're working with, kind of material you're reading, the kind of spiritual traditions you're practicing. You want to make sure that they're the ones that have the highest integrity and they are really focusing you in on the truth of self-love and the divine that it's within you. So what is the statement that we have heard recently that we want to comment about?
I've heard this several times in the past week, and that is that you only love someone based on how they make you feel.
This is a problematic statement if you think about it for a little while.
And that can be really dangerous.
We're going to point out all the reasons why that's a problem. First of all...
Well, obviously there's a limit. If someone's behaving horrifically, that's going to cause stress instead of peace. That's pretty straightforward. So it's not a completely useless statement, but it is actually a very dangerous statement. And the reason that it's dangerous is because if you're looking for somebody else to make you feel a certain way, if you're perceiving that that person is making you feel blissed out and wonderful and pleasure and a high feeling or an excitement, whatever, that can be heavily conditioned stories that you're telling yourself. So that is not a sign that you love that person or that that person's in any way good for you, because when you meet someone, they temporarily make you feel good in the beginning. That is not a way to evaluate whether or not you love a person or should commit to a person or should investigate the next step in any way whatsoever. That is useless information to you. So the way another person makes you feel can be really based on self-deception.
Yeah, this is very interesting because we've done a lot of videos on boundaries. So clearly you have to have good boundaries and assess whether or not somebody is treating you correctly. They're kind, they're generous, they're loving,
they're humble.
They're humble. They are, the love is coming out of them in a way that you do feel it. The converse of that is that you don't want to be, none of us want to be a person walking around that is assessing relationships based on how those people are caretaking your feelings. That's not being a responsible, self-aware, self-actualized adult, a sovereign light being. So we have to be very careful that, yes, people need to treat us correctly and be with kindness and love. And also, we need to be responsible for caretaking our own feelings and not walking around and basically demanding that everybody makes us feel good, because no one's responsible for us. We're responsible for ourselves.
Yeah, and your demands might be excessive themselves. So
they might be out of balance.
So you might think that someone else is responsible for all of your emotions when you're not being clear or transparent with your own self. So that statement is a very... what is the word? Fickle. A fickle way to look at what love really is, and we need to do a much deeper looking within to understand. I would actually say that this statement really reminds me of what it means to be transactional. And a lot of people don't know what that means, and they assume that they do know what that means. So this is how I'm going to describe it today. I would say that the best explanation of being transactional is what Buddhists call the hungry ghost. So they actually have a mythic image of I've seen the statues before, and they have a hole going down their whole digestive system, like the whole aspect of it from the mouth to the bottom. And it's empty. And so they can't take in any sweetness or nourishment. It's like the uneaten fruit. And they feel that emptiness, which is actually them having closed themselves to love, which is an amazing, empowering insight, because the second you desire to reopen internally to love, you can get rid of that hungry ghost. But if you start looking outside of you, other people are responsible for the feelings that I have about myself. You become codependent and transactional, and you constantly look for that filling of the emptiness within from outside of you. And because it's impossible to fill it from outside of you, it compounds a sense of shame and failure every time that doesn't work out. Every time somebody doesn't fit your expectations, it destroys your sense of self. It is this vicious cycle that you are constantly being proven that that emptiness is there. And that can create a loop that people can get stuck on. And this is pretty universal, so there shouldn't be shame for it. But the minute we realize I'm not aware of the love inside my own core of my being, and I desire to know that love, that is recognizing that there is a seed of infinite love within you, and you can plant and nourish that seed. But this external seeking and demands within a relationship that someone else is giving me beliefs about myself, about my worthiness of love. No one can make you believe something about yourself that you haven't agreed to. It's very important to understand and shift into a self-responsibility in order to regain our power to come back to our home and our true internal nature.
When we make this shift in our perception about where love is coming from to internally, then our whole landscape is able to change. And then we'll actually get into relationships that mirror that loving, responsible, caring sort of energy. So makes boundaries much easier to practice because you're having an internal recognition of the love within. So you automatically know and can respond to somebody who is not a loving person and it's not going to treat you well. You can simply walk away from that person, and it's easy to do because you would never treat yourself that way. But you also conversely need to be looking at and finding that love constantly and feeding that love inside yourself, so you don't start putting demands on other people and become the feeder in the relationship. So, or become the one trying to pull the energy. You want to dismantle what we say is the power struggle in a relationship by taking your power back instead of trying to always get it from someone else. So this is a key to self-love. It's the biggest insight, is to turn inward for self-love and look at who you are and what you're bringing out. And the boundary videos we've done is all about discerning who you should be around and, what kind of relationships you're feeding yourself with.
And this also breaks the chains of entanglement and disempowerment of believing that you have to focus on resenting another person or judging another person or expecting something from another person, because if they're behaving in a way that's dehumanizing, it's not my business. I have friends, family, and exes that behaved that way, and I moved on really quickly because I just don't have time for that. I didn't resent any of them. I actually had compassion because I knew their bad behavior meant that they were suffering and ignorant of the way that they were treating other people, because they didn't love themselves enough. I didn't have even thoughts that needed to be wasted on examining why they were acting the way they were acting. I fully accepted that person's suffering, and that's not for me. And you start moving on really quickly the more you develop this inner core of love, and you still can have unconditional love in a universal sense for those people, even though it's not a relationship anymore once you walk away. But they don't deserve your time if they're not accountable for their behavior. If they're not honest and transparent, they don't get a second of this energy from the core of your being. You just accept them fully. You don't sit there and ruminate with judgment that that person isn't as developed as you need them to be, because they're not your problem. That's between them and the divine. You're your problem. Nobody else is. So,
and I think a lot of folks who end up doing sessions with us, we tell them, the one thing you need to work on is to go inside and develop that relationship with the inner light.
Get super
inside.
honest about what you're doing rather than trying to figure out why other people are acting a certain way. How are you cheating yourself? So my experience with my marriage and when I met my husband is the opposite of the statement that you love someone based on how they make you feel. Of course, with the minor, partial, infinitesimal truth of that, you're not getting in an agreement with someone who disrespects you, as we talked about. But I did my personal work in my own heart to know that I was filled from the core of my being with divine love, not with an external person, before I met my husband. So I wasn't trying to project something onto him. I looked at myself and took 100% responsibility for every agreement I had ever made in any relationship, because that was my business and that's the only thing I'm responsible for. So it was the opposite of what these leaders say. And let's see, what else I say. So when I met Grace, I saw his inner qualities, not just how he made me feel from a delusion. I saw truly, my investigation was, who is he? Who is he internally? How does he feel about himself? Is he accountable for his processes where he needs to transform and continuing to discover the love that is his own being, not something that I can give him or that he can give me? So there was this extraordinary experience of seeing how he showed up for life, and it allowed a mirror to happen between us. And I realized this was the first relationship I was ever in where I didn't feel a longing for something from another person. I actually felt the opposite of that. What I felt was, it is an extraordinary treasure and honor to love a person who exists like this. And I don't want anything from him. Even if he didn't want to be my partner, I would love him unconditionally as my best friend for the rest of my life. And it would be a treasure to me to make his life beautiful. That would be my honor. You know, when you feel that way, that you've done your work and that you are truly loving another being wholly and seeing who they are, not just how they make you feel.
And to add, the other part of that is that you can't be afraid to be your authentic self. So if your authentic self is scary or difficult for other people, and I'm talking about you're still compassionate and kind and all this, but if you're expressing your authentic self and other people can't handle that, let them go. It's fine. I was authentic with Persia, and Persia recognized that authentic self that I was
saw
being,
that as a strength.
and I was able to, we were able to ask each other very difficult questions, and
we
answer
showed
those
vulnerability to each other.
Yeah, and so that's why we're saying it came from this internal thing of being authentic and real and put yourself out there in a way that some people couldn't handle it, and that's fine. They weren't meant to be in our lives, and we love each other in a way that I think is beyond words, and it's a gift.
I think our conversations about the vulnerable aspects of ourselves were expressed in an empowered way. Like, I have this incredible gift to receive a treasure from transforming the vulnerabilities that are keeping me back from my internal power of the love that is my own being. When I expressed and when Grace expressed our vulnerabilities, we did it with that sense of empowerment that this was an opportunity for us to grow, and we demonstrated that before we met each other, and then we had stories to share with each other about it.
So this is the end of the video, and what we're saying, and we're kind of drifting into relationship stuff, but the most loving, most positive, beautiful relationship you can have is with yourself, and then other people can only mirror that love that you have for yourself.
And you won't compromise what you've given yourself.
So you work on what's in the way of love in yourself, and then the universe will respond by bringing you more loving relationships that can match that work. So that's self-love part 2.
That's the treasure that we have as being alive on this planet.
That's right. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening to the talk. And if you have comments, please comment. If there's a question, ask a question, we'll answer, and like our video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.